Okay, let me read it again. The providence of God, or divine providence, is the governance of God by which he, with wisdom and love, cares for and directs all things in the universe. Divine providence asserts that God is in complete control of all things. He is sovereign over the universe as a whole. He is in control of the physical world. He is in control of the affairs of nations. He is in control of human destiny. He is in control of human successes and failures. And he protects his people. And then it's through divine providence that God accomplishes his will. Let me start by reading something that I read last week from Rick Warren, who is pastor Saddleback Church down in Orange County, and he's written a bunch of books, and he writes a devotion that I read every day. I'll try to read every day, and this one I think fits our study of David. He starts by saying, and study of David in providence. So it says, in the middle of your hurts, habits, and hang-ups, God is watching over you. King David says to God in Psalms 23, verse 6, surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life. That's from the New Living Translation. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life. When David says, surely your goodness will pursue me, he's not saying, surely only good things are going to happen to me. David knew as well as anyone, that bad things happen to good people. He had been abused we've been talking about David. He had been abused and treated unfairly and was still a man who followed God's heart. But he also sinned terribly against people who had done no wrong to him. And we'll talk about that as we get to our study, but Uriah is an example, the husband of Bathsheba. He hadn't done anything to David. So, but the point is that he was a man after God's own heart. He had been abused and treated unfairly and was still a man who followed God's heart, but he had also sinned terribly against people who had done no wrong to him. David's point is that no matter how bad, evil, or difficult something seems, and no matter how much we mess things up, God will work it out for good. His goodness is pursuing us no matter which way we turn. It's one of God's promises that he's given to believers. This one we know. And we know that all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. That's Romans 8:28. In everything that happens to us, God is working for our good if we love God and are following his plans. This verse does not say that all things are good. But if you're a believer, all things are working together for God's plan and purposes, which are always good. That means there's no difficulty, dilemma, defeat, or disaster in the life of a believer that God cannot ultimately turn toward his purpose. That's God's providence. When you believe that, it changes how you view everything in your life. Your relationships with God and with other people, your past, your future, and whatever you're facing today. As you trust in God's good work in your life, you will be able to face even your toughest challenges with confidence. So I think that fits. That works when we are aware as believers. And the important key to this is being a believer. We've talked about this before. God grants a universal grace to everybody. There's sun, there's rain, there's air, right? There's food for everybody. That's available to everybody. But there are certain things that are only available to believers. And that is that everything works together for good of those who love God and according to his purpose. And that defines a believer. So for a believer, everything, no matter what it looks like at the time, God will work it out for your good. And that's God's promise. God's desire for all of us is found in Romans 8:29 when it talks about that 8:28 says, works everything according to his purpose. And if you look at, go to Romans 8:29 just real quickly. Johnny.
For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to become conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers.
Okay, so verse 28 says those are called for his purpose, and then verse 29 tells you what God's purpose for us as believers is, and that's to be conformed to the image of his Son. So whatever happens in your life, God works out so that you'll be conformed to the image of his Son. And what that means is that the image, it means you'll be full of love and have the mind of Christ. You love everybody and you want to please God. That's conformance to his Son. So that's what everything works out. God works everything out for that purpose. That's God's providence for every believer. Okay, so last week, we get back to last week. We talked about David actually going into the pits. That's the term I used. After being victorious over the temptation of not killing, of taking advantage on Saul. Remember, he was tempted. He had the opportunity to kill Saul, and he didn't. Right? Because he said that Saul was God's anointed. He was going to allow God to take care of it. Right? And then last week we talked about that. But last week we actually specifically talked about Nabal, who had also wronged David, right? And in this instance, David was going to take vengeance himself until he was convinced, and I say it was God's providence, he was convinced by Abigail, Nabal's wife, that that's probably not the thing to do. If you're going to be the king, don't go into your kingship with blood on your hands. That's kind of what she said. And here's all this stuff. Here's the food and the stuff that my cousin didn't give you for taking care of his property and his staff. But those were two victorious things. David had decided to let God take vengeance, so he was on a high. Remember I said last week, when we're victorious over something, we need to be careful because we let our guard down. And we're vulnerable to attacks from the enemy, and the enemy will use other people generally. Uses other people or circumstances to attack you. So we need to be careful when we're on a high. We've had a great success. And we said last week, David, well, let's read this. Hester, 1 Samuel, if you would, chapter 27, verse 1. First Samuel, Hester. First Samuel 27, verse 1. Yeah, chapter 27, verse 1. And pull your mask out just to read it. Thank you.
David said in his heart, one day I will be slain by the hand of Saul. There's nothing better for me than to leave the land of David. With Saul, all the territories of Israel.
Okay, all right. So David, after all of this success, became pessimistic. If was beginning to become depressed, and his perspective on life changed from a horizontal it became horizontal. Let me put it there. He became horizontal, meaning he looked at other people or other things rather than vertical, looking at God. So the first clue we got is that he said he thought to himself. He didn't consult God. He thought to himself. That's horizontal, not vertical. So he became pessimistic. Then he said, I'll be destroyed. He thought to himself, I'm going to be destroyed. And then logically, he thought, using human logic, the best thing I can do is escape to the Philistines and I can get away from Saul. So he started getting depressed. And so then now he's with the Philistines, who are his enemies. So in order to stay alive with the enemies, he had to come up with this plan to keep he had to come up with what I call it a charade, and so that the enemy would believe that he was no longer helping Saul and he was with them. Then real quickly, go to 1 Samuel 27, verses 8 through 12.
David and his men went up and raided the Israelites or Adamites. I don't know. From many ancient times, those people had lived in the land and extending to Shir and Egypt. And every day David attacked an area, he did not leave a man or a woman alive, but took sheep, cattle, and donkeys, and camels, and clothes. Then he returned to Achish. And Achish asked, "Where did you go raiding today?" David would say, "Against the Naib and the Judah, or against the Naib or Israel, or against the Naib or the Kenites." He did not leave a man or woman alive to be brought back to God, for he thought he might inform on us and say, "This is what David did," and such was his practice as long as he did in the Philistine territory. Achish, just as David said to himself, he has become so oblivious to his people, the Israelites, that he will be my servant.
Okay, so David goes and he puts on this charade. He says that he's attacking. He said what David was saying things like to make Achish assume that he was attacking the Israelites when he was not. He was actually attacking people that were allies of the Philistines because he didn't want to attack the Israelites, his people. He didn't want to attack them, but he had to put up this charade so he had to make the enemy think that he was on his side, and that worked. And we said that works. You can put up a charade for a while, and you can fool people for a while, but you got to continue. That's like my mother used to tell me, you shouldn't lie because you have to tell other lies in order to back that up. Right. And sooner or later, you're going to reach the point where you're going to come to the end of that, and you're going to have to deal with what happens. And that's what happened with David. The enemy finally said, "Hey, look, this guy used to be with Saul Achish's allies, the other nations, because Achish liked him. David, he said David would be a servant for our life. But his allies said, "Hey, no, this guy was with Saul. He may turn against us. Don't let him go out with us, because he may turn against us when we're fighting Saul. Send him home." And Achish did. So now David's already depressed. He's tried to rationalize that I go to the enemy, I'll be safe. Now the enemy has said, "No, you cannot stay here. You got to go home." And so he went on. So now David is he's lost Saul and all of that. He's lost the trust of his enemies. He's really depressed now. And on top of that, when he goes home to Ziklag, remember Achish had given David Ziklag, a town. When he goes back after getting kicked to the curb, he goes back to Ziklag and he finds that the people that he had been attacking, been attacking, saying he was attacking Judah, had come to Ziklag, had burned the city, had taken his wife, his two wives, and his men's wives and children, and David now, and because this had happened, they were now ready to kill him. So David's depressed after all of this success. David logically is thinking to himself, "Hey, I'm still running, so I got to hide." After all this success, he's depressed. He's keeping up with charade. After all of this success, there's a problem. His men now say, "You're the problem, David. So we're going to kill you. We followed you. We're going to kill you." Then It was at that point in time. So this lets us know it's never too late. Right? It's never too late for us to look to God. David finally looked to God and read verse, got it, 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 6. Chapter 30, verse 6. Chapter 30, verse 6.
And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God.
Okay, all right. So David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Read the next couple verses.
And David said to Abiathar, the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. And David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue after this band? Shall I overtake them? He answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue. So David set out, and the 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook and saw it.
Okay, stop. That's not what the beginning of thing was. David reached a point where he was people were going to kill him, and he reached out to ask God, consulted God. God answered him, and eventually what ended up happening, we don't have to read that. Eventually what ended up happening is they went back, recovered all of the stuff and all of the people, right? Because he had finally looked, his view, perspective finally became vertical rather than horizontal. All right. So today we're going to look. Now I don't know why our writer did this, but it's okay because I think it's something we should talk about. We actually depart from David, right, and we talk about Saul a little bit. Okay. So after David recovers the people from Ziklag, we're going to talk about Saul today a little bit, and we're going to at the end do something I think the guy did something that was really, really unusual, and but it worked, and that was compare the death of Saul with the death of Christ. That doesn't sound like that would work, but we'll see that. It will. We'll get there. Okay. All right. Let's look at. So let's change now. Saul. If you remember Saul's history, Saul started out with great potential. Right? He started out with great potential. People said they wanted a king. God told Samuel to pick Saul and anoint Saul as king. So Saul started out with great potential. Hester, would you go to 1 Samuel chapter 10? Go back to chapter 10. Right? 1 Samuel chapter 10, and then read verses 1 and 2. They did take your mask. I can't hear you.
Samuel took the vial of oil and poured it on his head. He said, "Has Adonai not appointed you to rule over his person? Please today will find me in Rachel, the territory of Benjamin, and Joseph. They will say to you, no peace. He set up for you found gold, your father, not matter, and then now worry about what should I do about my son."
Okay, now read verse 9.
And Saul turned back, he Samuel, that God consumed his heart. All those signs came to pass at the day.
Okay, so Saul starts out with great potential, right? However, Saul actually blew it. He became disobedient to God's commandments as given through Samuel, because, again, his viewpoint now became vertical, horizontal, and not vertical. Take a look, Jeanette, at 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 7 through 14. So Saul's become disobedient.
Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of God and Gilead. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal. And Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offering." Saul offered up burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. "What have you done?" asked Samuel. Samuel replied, "When I saw that the men were scattering, and that you did not come at that time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me and Gilgal, and I have not sought to save the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering." "You have done a foolish thing," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all the time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's commandments." Okay, so
Saul is disobedient. He does a couple of things. One, he didn't wait for Samuel. Samuel said wait. The other thing was he offered to burn over. Remember when we studied in the wilderness, who was supposed to do the burnt offering? The priest. Right? Saul was not a priest, right? Okay, right? So that's true. He's not a priest. He can't do the burnt offerings. He did that on his own, right? Because he felt that the men are leaving, so I need to take matters into my own hands, please. So his viewpoint. So then that was disobedient. So he lost the kingdom there, because what it says is that your kingdom would not endure. The Lord has sought out a man for his own heart. Now we know who that was. We know that was David, and we know that later on Samuel goes and he anoints David. Okay, so that's good. All of this. Now, when Saul was disobedient, Saul became paranoid. He tried to chase David down. He had a problem. The scripture says God impacted him with an evil spirit. So he'd go off sometimes. So Saul's life now was beginning to crumble, and all of this culminated in tragedy for Saul and his family, because his sons died on the same day in a battle, and he committed suicide. Right, that same day. Go to Johnny. Go to. Let me see how I want to do this. David actually had an opportunity to kill Saul a couple times, right? Twice. And he didn't, right? But Saul's life still in tragedy. I want to visit this time David could have killed him. Look at 1 Samuel 24 verses 1 through 4.
When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi." Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to see David and his men in front of the wild goats rock. And he came to the sheepfold by the way. where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. And now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave. And the men of David said to him, Here is the day of which the Lord has said to you, Behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it shall seem good to you. Then David arose and steadily cut off a corner of Saul's robe.
Okay, so there's something. So David had the opportunity to kill Saul. He didn't. All he did was cut off the robe. So David spared his life in the cave. He could have killed him, but he was going to leave vengeance to God. Now, that was he also had another opportunity to kill Saul and didn't. Take a look at, in this instance, David and his men saw Saul and his troop at a camp, right? And David took one of his guys and snuck into the camp, right? And he saw Saul asleep with his bodyguards all around him asleep, and he could have killed him. That, as a matter of fact, his partner, and since David, I guess maybe he thought this. I'm using my sanctified imagination. Since David didn't kill Saul in the cave, Abishai, who was the fellow that went in with David, encouraged David to let him kill him. Because I guess he did figure David wasn't going to kill him. He wanted to kill him, but David would not let him kill him. So twice, David had an opportunity to kill Saul, but he would not take vengeance himself. He would wanted to allow God to take care of him. Here's the point I guess I want to make, is that with Saul had great potential, and he messed up early on. He kept messing up. And near the end of his life, he defined himself by saying that he played the fool. Saul recognized himself that all of his life he had played the fool. Look at who read last? Okay. Look at Samuel chapter 26, verse 20. Let's start at verse, let me see. I want you to start at verse 17, Hester. Verse Samuel 26. Verse 17 through 21.
So then recognizing David's voice and said, Your voice, David? One? This is my voice. Lord. And added, Why is my Lord doing so? What have I done? What evil is in my hand? Now see, my Lord, listen to the words of the Lord. But then I have stirred you up against me, and then it's just an offering. But then had I so. First, my grace before I was out, because they now with me out. I will not see not humility in those which are otherwise. Now, not my blood fall to the ground away from you. Or not. But along of Israel, the king of Israel, has come out first of all, with a single seed, and one hunt for pocket in the mountain. We saw the flag and then return. My son, I will no longer be harmed with my life. Precious in your eyes. No, I have saved you.
Okay. I'm sorry. You threw a 21? Okay. So Saul sums up his life. He is saying, I have acted as like a fool. So he take from all this potential that he had. He messed up after that, right? He sums up his life and says, I have played the fool. Now, I'm going to read what the description that Chuck Swindoll has in the book, because I think it works. It says, I have played the fool. How aptly that describes the life of Saul. I had God on my side, yet I lived as though he did not exist. There was a great, glorious sunrise in my career in which you anointed me as a king, or at least the people did. I was the pick of the litter in Israel. I was a head above all the other men. I was handsome. I was winsome. I was strong. Natural leader. I was a man who could do the job. The people of Israel chose me to lead me, but they didn't know the inside of me. I have played the fool. That sums up his life. Now, let me read something else that I thought was, again, very impactful that was in the book. And this was written by, again, he didn't say what the publication was from, but there's a guy who was an Australian guy who was a pastor and theologian. His name is Sidlow Baxter. Here's what he describes what it means to play the fool. Okay? A man plays the fool when he neglects his godly friends, as Saul neglected Samuel. Remember, Samuel said, "Don't do this," and he neglected Samuel's advice and sacrifice. A man plays the fool when he goes on enterprises before God has sent him, as Saul did. A man plays the fool when he disobeys God, even in small matters, as Saul at first did. There was one time where God, through Samuel, told Saul to go attack one of the Philistine tribes and to kill them all. And he did. He killed everybody but the king and killed them all. He said, kill them all, kill all the livestock. He left the best livestock and the king. So that was a small matter, right? So a man pays the fool when he disobeys God, even in small matters that Saul at first did. For such disobedience nearly always leads to worse defeat. His indiscretions became worse and worse and worse. He took the position of a priest, and the sacrifices. He hunted down an innocent man, David. Right. So he did. His indiscretions got worse and worse and worse. So man pays the fool when he disobeys God, even in small matters, just like us. If we do something and it happens, if you do something that, it's not really bad, but you get away with it. And then you do more and more and more, and then the defeat you have is a bad one. We can use the example of David with Ziklag. He lied, and it ended up with him almost getting killed, right? A man pays the fool when he tries to cover up his disobedience by religious exercises, as Saul did, right? He tried to cover it up by the sacrifices, tried to cover up his disobedience, because to obey is better than sacrifice, and that's scripture. Should have obeyed. A man pays the fool when he tries to persuade himself that he is doing the will of God, as Saul tried to persuade that he is doing the will of as Saul tried to persuade himself, when all the time, deep down in his heart, he knows otherwise. A man pays the fool when he allows some jealousy or hatred to master or enslave and deprave him. as Saul did for David. A man plays a fool when he knowingly fights against God, as Saul did in hunting David down to save his own face. A man plays a fool when he turns from God, from the God he is, seeks an alternative in spiritism and traffic with spirits in the beyond. This maybe was the final straw with Saul. He actually consulted spirits that were not God. Go to 1 Samuel 28 verses 3 through 8.
Now Samuel was dead, and all of Israel had mourned for him and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Samuel had expelled the Midians in spirit.
And Saul is expelled.
Oh, I'm sorry. Saul had expelled the Midians and spirits from the land. The Philistines assembled and came up and set up camp at Shur. And while Saul gathered all of Israel and set up camp in Gilboa, the town of the Philistine army was afraid, and terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him. By dreams or terms or prophets, Saul then said to his attendants, "Find a woman who is a Midian, so I may go and inquire of her." There was one in Endor. They said, so Saul disguised himself, putting on clothes at night, and he and two men went to the woman. "Consult the spirit for me," he said, "and bring up me from the one I named."
Okay, all right. Now, so Saul has descended to this level, right? He has consulted God, but God doesn't answer him, right? So he says, okay, what I got to do is that, and he himself had expelled all the mediums, right? But now God's not answering him. He's afraid. Now God's not answering him, so he says, "Find me one now," and right, so I can consult with her. And they find one, and he asks her to consult and to bring up one he named. So surprise, surprise, who comes up? Johnny. Read 1 Samuel 28, 16 through 19. Well, no, we got to start there. Start at because it doesn't work. Start at verse.
And 9. Start at 9.
Start at 9. Let's start at 9.
The man said to him, "Surely you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off the Medians and the necromancers from the land. Why then are you laying a trap for me, my life to bring about my death?" But Saul swore to her by the Lord, "As the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for his name." Then the woman said, "What shall I bring up for you?" He said, "Bring up Samuel for me." Then the woman saw Samuel. She cried out a loud voice. And the woman said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? Who is Saul?" The king said to her, "Do not be afraid. What do you see?" And the woman said to Saul, "I see a God coming up out of the earth." He said to her, "What is his appearance?" And she said, "An old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a robe." Saul knew it was Samuel. And he bowed his face to the ground, paying homage. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" Saul answered, "I am in great distress, for the Philistines are warring against me. God has turned away from me and answers me no more, either by prophet or by dreams. Therefore I summoned you to tell me what I should do." And Samuel said, "Why then did you ask me, that the Lord has turned from you and became your enemy? The Lord has done to you as he spoke by me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David. Because you did not obey the voice of the Lord and did not carry out his fierce wrath against Amalek. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you today. Or the Lord will give Israel also with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me. The Lord will give the army of Israel also in the hand of the Philistines. Then Saul fell off. Okay,
that's it, yeah. You to 19? Okay.
Huh?
You done with 19? Okay, all right. Okay, so Saul has now come all of from being a king with a lot of potential. He's now descended to the level he's consulting mediums. Right now, I'm next week I want to talk about that a little bit because remember, God says we shouldn't consult mediums, right? And yet she consulted me, and yet Samuel came up and gave a prophecy. So that may be a little confusing to some people. So, and I've done a study on that, so we'll talk about that next week. Okay. But the point is, Saul has reached the bottom, right? And it ends up, and he gets a prophecy from Samuel, who's called up by a medium, right? That he and his sons are going to die, right, the next day. So what it says is the end of the ways of sin is moral and spiritual suicide. So that's what Saul has done, was committing moral and spiritual suicide. It reached that point. And the same thing with us. If we need to be very careful, even as believers, we need to be very careful that we don't play the fool like Saul did, that we don't become Christian atheists. That's someone who believes in God, right? Believes in God, but then acts as if he doesn't exist. Salvation is forever, right? If you're a believer, and you're really a believer, you are saved. You will have eternal life. It doesn't mean, though, that your actions won't result in consequences that are not good consequences. But Saul ended up in suicide, and his children were killed as a result of what he'd done. Now, they didn't do anything, the sons didn't do anything, but as a result of Saul's actions, they were impacted. We've talked about that too before. Your actions impact other people. So we all be aware of what we do, good and bad, because it impacts other people. So Saul meets a tragic death along with his sons. He committed suicide. Look at Hester, 1 Samuel 31, verses 1 through 6. This is what happens after Samuel tells Saul what's going to happen to him. 1 Samuel 31, 1 through 6.
Many Israel's slain are not for. This is hard after Saul. This is struck down signs. And Abinadab and Nakashua, the son of Saul. The battle intensified and saw the archers. He was wounded by the archer. Then Saul said to the armor bearer, "Call your sword. It's not to be believed, for the skeleton, uncircumcised, the uncircumcised will come and struck me through, having forfeited. But our bearer refused So God took this sword and strong it. The armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead. Likewise, so long his sword and died with him. Armor-bearer and all died together.
Okay, so they were defeated. They were defeated rightly. Now Saul commits suicide, though, because he doesn't want to suffer the indignity of being killed by the Philistines, who said would torture him and kill him. So he was concerned about his image with the enemy, more concerned about that than he was his relationship with God. He was more concerned. And so the same thing happens with us. When we disobey, it causes our senses to get dull. When we disobey, we're more concerned with our image. When we disobey and lie and try to disobey, we're more concerned with our image with other people than we are with God. We're concerned about what people will say, and we lose contact with what God thinks and what God would say, because we're more concerned. And this was Saul's problem. This is Saul, because he said it. Kill me now, otherwise these Philistines are going to embarrass me. Right, essentially is what he was saying. So his death and the death of his sons was tragic. Didn't have to be. That did not have to happen to Saul. Had he obeyed, had he kept his head on straight, it didn't happen. So none of this had to happen to him. It did because of disobedience, though, right? When you disobey, you started going down, and David was headed this way, right? When you start going down the hill, and you may not be able to recover. Saul was not able to recover, and because he ended up consulting a medium rather than God. Different than him and David is David consulted God. When he reached the bottom of the pit, he consulted God. Saul did not. Saul consulted a medium, and we see what ended up happening to him. So let's keep our focus vertical rather than horizontal. Now, let me look at what he did. The writer did about he called it Christ's death, a classic analogy. He had an analogy between Saul's death and Christ's death, and I didn't think it would work. But let me show you how he did this. Okay, and there's 6 analogies that he has. Hopefully we can get through them all. First, Saul's death appeared to be the end of all national hope. Remember now, at this battle where he and his sons were hit, they were routed. The Israelites were routed and they ran home. Right? So his death appeared to be the end of all national hope. The thought might have been the Philistines are going to surely conquer us. We've lost hope. Right? So Saul's death, the king, and his son's dead. Right? So appeared to be the end of all national hope. Christ's death appeared to be the end of all national and spiritual hope. This is the analogy. We're going to go somewhere with this. When Christ died, his followers, or the disciples who followed him, thought that he was coming as the Messiah, was going to have a military conquest, right? Going to take over. He's dead now. So they thought we've all lost all hope. The Messiah is dead. The dream is over. All is finished. So it looked like the end of all national and spiritual hope. So that's an analogy. Saul's death looked that way. So did Christ's death. Well, obviously we know that was not the case, because Christ did not come as a military leader. He came to change people's view, to create a relationship that with God that man did not have that. Second, with Saul's death, it seemed that the adversary had won the final victory. The king is dead, and his son's dead. Matter of fact, if we read on, the Philistines cut off Saul's head and they hang him, right? So it looks like the end that he had the final victory. When Christ died, it seemed that the adversary, the enemy, that Satan had won. The Messiah is dead. I've won. It seemed that way, right? Second on that. Third, Saul's death paved the way for an entirely new plan of operation and ushered in David's kingdom line. Now, here's what's important. When Saul died, his death paved the way for a new plan of operation. Typically what happens when the monarch died, their heir became the new monarch, right? The king. All of Saul's family was not killed. He had grandsons, right? Jonathan had a grandson. We talked about it. So all of his line, but that line ended with him, and so they brought in a new kingly line. David now became king. Okay, follow me? When Christ died, a whole new operation for salvation came into effect. We were no longer obligated to obey the law. We now were saved by faith. You follow me? Does it make sense? What I'm saying makes sense? Go for okay. All right. Number 4. Saul's death opened the opportunity for another who would not otherwise be included in God's line of blessing. Right? When Saul died, the opportunity came for David now to become king. Okay? Which was different from what it normally was. One of Saul's heirs would have normally become king. He died, but now David becomes king. Here's the analogy. When Christ died, it opened up the opportunity of salvation to Gentiles. Beforehand, Before you had to obey the law, and only the Jews had the law, right? The opportunity for Gentiles came when Christ died. Okay? That makes sense? The analogy was, so with Saul's death, opened up an opportunity for another who would not otherwise have been included. All right? The Gentiles became included in God's family because of the death of Christ. Make sense so far? Ask the question.
I don't want to.
Okay.
You repeat. Last.
Okay, I said, 4, Saul's death opened the opportunity for another who would not otherwise have been included in God's line of blessing, namely David. Christ's death graciously opened the opportunity of salvation's blessings to Gentiles who would never have otherwise been able to enter and become boldly before the throne of God. Okay. 5, Saul's death ended an era of dissatisfaction and failure. Okay, when Saul died, when Saul was king, they were constantly at war with the Philistines. Constantly. When David became king, he defeated the Philistines, and there was a period of time where there was peace. Okay? So Saul's death ended an era of dissatisfaction and failure. Okay? You understand about Saul, right? Because when David came, there was peace, right? So Saul's death ended that time of dissatisfaction and failure. They couldn't be, right? So forth. Okay. Christ's death ended an era of law and guilt. Guilt, right. Christ's death ended an era of law and guilt. Until Christ, if you could not obey all of the law, and nobody could ever, right? There was also always the guilt of not being pleasing to God, not being able to please God, right? Christ's death ended that, ended the requirement of obeying the law in order to be for salvation. Law is important. We've already said that. The law is always important because if it wasn't the law, we wouldn't understand, wouldn't know what sin was, right? But you're not saved because of that. We're saved by grace. Christ's death ended an era of law and guilt, introducing a new arrangement based on grace. Okay? Finally, Saul's death displayed the foolishness of man. Christ's death displayed in human terms. Right? Christ's death displayed in human terms the foolishness of God. The scripture tells us man thinks it's foolish for one man to die for everybody's sin. That's what man, humanly speaking, one man dying who didn't sin for people who sinned, that's foolish, right? That's the foolishness as far as man is concerned of God's plan. God's foolish for sending his son who never sinned in order to die for everything. So Saul's death displayed the foolishness of man. If Saul was a fool, he just said, I'll play the fool, right? Christ's death displayed in human terms the foolishness of man. Through the foolishness of God's plan, he brings to pass the incredible. God's plan takes the preached word of the gospel and changes lives because of his son's death. Right? It's also foolish. They bruised and mocked the body of Jesus, and after his death, he was put in a tomb, right? No one knew what was going to happen next. So what happened next? He was resurrected, and salvation was assured. All right? So that appears to man from our viewpoint, that's foolish. It would be foolish for us to take one of our children, right, who had not done anything, and let somebody kill him or kill them because the other kids, in order for the other kids to live, right? That's foolish from a human point of view. So Saul's death displayed the foolishness of man. Saul played the fool, right? Christ's death displayed in human terms the foolishness of God, which resulted in salvation. Does that make sense? Are you confused?
No, not confused.
Okay. If you got any questions, Any questions? Okay. So we're going to end with it. Now, next week we're going to get back to David, but this was kind of a segue that the guy did in the book. But I think it was one that we should talk about because it does indicate that we can easily do like Saul and play the fool. It's very easy for us to do, especially when we're at the pinnacle, we're at the top, where the potential that we have as human beings, we all have it. We all have great potential, but we can, through disobedience, destroy that, and quite often it ends in tragedy. Okay, we're going to end there. Any questions or comments? Okay. Any prayer requests? No special prayer. Oh, go ahead. No special. Yeah, that's where we had the maturing mission state. We still want to continue to lift up the people in Syria and Turkey. Continue to pray for Alpha Mary and Marlene and Margaret. Continue to pray for them. So let's do that. Johnny, would you pray for us?
Heavenly Father, who comes to you, thank you for all that you have done for us. Everything that you've wanted to do. Loving, holding us up and not letting us fall. We thank you, dear Lord, for this blessing today. Thank you for our pastor. Continue to give him desire, skill, and knowledge in our close for all. Our hearts open, all the word. Understand, live life. This is your command. Or to love one another. Let us keep that in mind. Father, we intercede for all the people in Michigan, Turkey, Syria, all over this going to heartbreak. And have given the first responders all the materials that they need to be able to find more victims. They all we have to touch our sister Marlene, as she goes through all of these people. That Irma, her family, Lucille, Ned, her family, Esther, her family. Touch Brother Houston today, dear Lord, as he goes through his abuse. Love you. Miss you. Pray that you hear the jewel, let her know that she is missed and loved. Father, I ask that you will touch me. Everybody at this building, those who were spared, you know what we're all about, to strengthen that I am. Bless Christ Church, members and Christians therein, continue to strengthen Mary, she may be returning to us. Bless Bishop, all the Christians, bless our outreach for our unhoused. We thank you, dear Lord, for all of it, contributions that thank you. Bless you. We love you. We ask you Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen. Okay, next week we'll get back to David because now Saul is dead now, right? So we got a new king, and so we're going to start talking about that next week. All right. Irma, you still there?
Irma,
you gone? All right. Bye.